Hi, this is William Henderson.
And I'm B. McGraw.
And this is the final episode of our series on urban design. So we'll get started.
When it comes to community, so this is the one where I said we'd talk about it later again. And basically, if you go to, this paper says a systematic review to determine the role of public space in urban design on sense of community in the International Social Science Journal. And it basically says results indicate designing public spaces that facilitate social interaction is the main factor for enhancing SOC, which is sense of community. So it justifies the design of public spaces and built environments that favor interpersonal relationships between residents. And so basically, if you create spaces, that includes parks, but it also includes, inside a building, a privately owned building. If you have like an atrium where everybody like sits and like interacts with each other, those spaces really create that sense of community. Physical shared spaces.
If you use them.
Yeah.
That's like a big thing with a lot of the mid-rises and high-rises now, is all of the shared community spaces, mostly because they're competing on amenities with each other. But the people that use them get to know each other. Made a lot of friends that way.
Next, we're going to look at inequality. How do you reduce inequality? So one paper from Applied Geography, it says examining the relationship between urban form and social inequality and neighborhood level analysis. And it says compact urban form helps reduce social and spatial inequalities in central areas. Sprawl increases social inequality in peripheral neighborhoods. So sprawl increases inequality, compactness reduces it. Next is, I think the prototypical example is like New York City. People from different social backgrounds are more likely to walk past each other on the sidewalk, whereas in LA, if you live in Beverly Hills, you're never going to see people from like, South Central LA because you just never cross paths.
Yeah, not really.
And then finally, there's a paper. So this is semi-related to urban design, but this is from Nature, and it says social capital. One, measurement and associations with economic mobility. And basically, it says social capital, the strength of an individual's social network and community, has been identified as a potential determinant of outcomes ranging from education to health. And so they basically look at social capital by zip, connectedness between different types of people, such as low versus high social economic status, social cohesion, civic engagement, etc. And it says the share of high social economic status, so the share of high SES friends among individuals with low SES, is among the strongest predictors of upward income mobility identified to date. So basically, what is the biggest factor? If you're poor, what is the most likely to help you become wealthy? And the answer is like, do you know people who are wealthy?
Yeah.
And that is, which like at first glance, it's like, but then when you think about it, it's like, well, obviously, like, of course. And the thing is, like, that doesn't happen very often. Most people, like, very often people are kind of separated by social economic status.
Yeah, most people don't go outside of their bubbles.
But there are exceptions, like one thing, and this might be anecdotal, but there's like a lot of stories of people who like started out, they were like working class on Long Island and they were like golf caddies or whatever. And then they ended up,
I think there was a Planet Money episode about how people were doing that as like personal trainers.
Yeah. Yeah. Like golf caddies or personal trainers, and like those types of things can help you like, make friends with wealthy people despite being lower income.
So basically you got to suck up to somebody.
And so how this relates to urban design, it's not referenced in the paper, I think, but basically like, okay, well, what kind of urban design allows for people of different backgrounds to interact with each other? So that's something to really think about. How do you make sure that different income groups mix with each other in terms of social interaction?
Yeah.
If you want less inequality.
That's where you have to have like mixed income level units in your buildings, maybe.
Yeah, it's so the concept of like, if you say like a new apartment has to have like at least X% affordable. I'm not sure what the research says on that. I think one risk there is like it could make a development not pencil in anymore if it's like, if like 50% of the units have to like have rents below X, then it might not be like profitable, or not unprofitable, but like not be a high enough ROI.
Oh yeah, so you don't get any development.
Here's an idea: is like, what if a city builds public housing buildings every couple blocks? So that like every couple blocks you have a sort of apartment that's like built specifically for lower income people. And so they live in a neighborhood where the rest of the neighborhood is just like middle class or whatever.
Okay, this is kind of working into one of the points that I wrote at the end of the page, but I'm going to just bring it in here. How do you make cities affordable for the working class? And this is the big thing that's like in the news right now with what's his name? Zoran. Zoran Mamdani. That he's talking about with rent controls and whatnot, and like how do you make the two things that I don't know how you do, especially like in like a super urban environment, is how do you make cities work for working class people, and how do you make it work for families with kids?
Families is tough. Well, making housing affordable in a city is not that hard, because like that's what they do that in Tokyo and in Vienna. In Tokyo, they just have like very permissive zoning, and so there's a lot of apartment buildings that are like not literally shoebox size, but like very small apartment buildings. And so you just, maybe per square footage, it's not super cheap, but like as a unit, it's pretty affordable.
Oh, and people totally will like rent those out. Like so many working class would totally live in a shoebox. Like, well, like if it's actually affordable, they'd rather do that than like have to split it with roommates they don't know, or like be homeless, obviously. But yeah, like well, and the trade-off of being homeless or rooming with strangers, I think a lot of people take I'll live in the really tiny apartment.
Yeah. So in Manhattan, a lot of like apartment building, like they'll have like people who like, there's an apartment that's like a single bedroom apartment, but they'll like put a bookshelf in the middle, or they'll try to modify it to make it feel like a 2-bedroom. Anyways, but like like if you just built more housing and you built smaller units, you can easily make rent a lot more affordable. It's still going to probably cost more than like a smaller city, obviously, because demand's higher.
But, Are there zoning laws that prevent people from making like smaller units at like cheaper, smaller units?
Yeah, there's unit minimum sizes in most places. That's definitely a huge factor. And then even in when you think about New York City, you're like, well, they don't have strict zoning. Like it's like skyscrapers everywhere. But like the broader metro area does actually have a lot of restrictions, like across the river, across the Hudson River in New Jersey. Places like Hoboken have height restrictions, and then even like parts of New York City outside of Manhattan, there's still restrictions, and even in Manhattan, the sort of area between Midtown and the sort of lower Manhattan has stricter height limits. So they still exist.
Crazy.
Yeah, they still exist.
Wow.
Not as much as other, just not as much as other cities, but they still exist. But like Tokyo is the perfect example of a city that has very minimal sort of like restrictions. And then the other model is Vienna, where they just build, or Singapore, where they just build tons of public housing. And so that's another model. Either way, the point is build more housing, whether you do it privately or publicly,
I definitely want there to be a just build more housing units Wojak. We have the Nothing Ever Happens one. I really want a just build more houses Wojak.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know what it would look like though.
But when you think about like what cost of living in a big city. So, I mean, it's the same as, to different degrees, it's the same as any other city. It's, number one is housing, and then number two and three varies, but it's usually transportation and food, right? Those are kind of the big things that cost money. So housing, we talked about. Food, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we already subsidize food production, and grocery stores have pretty low profit margins. You could argue our food conglomerates too sort of like central, too concentrated in the market. Like you have like the big agribusinesses that like process all the meat and things like that. But I haven't done a lot of research on this, so I don't know. And then transportation.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you bring the prices down. Man, when we were in France the other day, it was so cheap at the grocery store. I'm wondering how they did that.
And then when it comes to transit, I guess like the only way to really make transit itself cheaper is really to subsidize it, I think. Assuming we do it's more efficient.
I think it's in everyone's like good to subsidize it at this point, because it's like you either have to like just make it work, or everyone lives in like commuting hell.
Well, there's the subsidizing, there's the subsidizing the building. There's like, how do you make things, like this episode, how do you make things efficient by making things compact, grid shaped, walkable, bikeable, etc., so you can do as much walking and biking as possible, because like walking is free. Biking is, once you buy your bike, it's free. So that's part of it. And then public transit, obviously there's the directly subsidize the building and operation of public transit. But on the payment side, because there's usually fares, some people argue fares shouldn't exist at all. I kind of have mixed feelings on that.
We definitely talked about this before.
Yeah, I think if you don't have any fares at all, I think when something is completely free, a lot of times people just are more likely to kind of trash it and don't respect it as much. It also like leads
even with fares, like there's still people taking advantage.
Ultimately, though,
how do you make it work for families? I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, they used to. I mean, I hate to say it, in the old days, they used to live in tenements. Like they would have like three kids to a room.
Oh my gosh, I know. I think that came up when I was reading what's that historic fiction book? The Alienist had some descriptions of like New York housing in the like late 1800s, and it was just like the entire family would live in the equivalent of a 2-bedroom apartment, and they'd just pack it in there.
I think that's where I think there's a pretty clear argument that a commuter town, like if there's a train connected commuter town that has a little more space, I think it makes sense for people who have larger families.
Yeah,
but, I mean,
I get that. I mean, especially like as long as you have like a train into the city that's affordable to use, like every day, because otherwise that's just an hour, 2 hours a day on the highway, depending on what city.
So we talked about these by externality, but let's kind of bring it all together. So let's talk about it by topic. So how do you improve transportation in a city? So you have grid pattern roads with narrow streets with lots of trees. You replace stroads with dedicated arterials. So don't put stores on the side of arterials. Make sure you have dedicated walking, cycling, and bus lanes. I guess a walking lane is just a sidewalk, but
so with replacing stroads is the better option, and this is probably for like not super dense cities, like mid-sized American cities, and not the urban centers. Do you do like that kind of strip mall where you have like a block with a bunch of stores, and then on one corner is the Applebee's?
Yeah, I mean, a main street is basically sort of like a more, kind of not quite an arterial, not quite a neighborhood road, but it's closer to like a sort of like narrower road that's just lined with shops. So I think a main street is kind of a good mod. Well, so for a lot of like daily and weekly things, like doing your laundry, getting coffee, getting haircuts, like a lot of that stuff can just be dispersed through the neighborhood. You could just have corner stores and things like that. When it comes to things that you don't do every day, like you don't go to the pet store every day, so things like that, maybe having a main street.
I'm talking like the big block stores. Like,
I don't think
you know how they have like the complex with like you got the Walmart, the Lowe's, and the
well, I don't think you need
something.
I don't think for most uses you don't really need to have a big box store. Like, why does a grocery store need to be like freaking massive? It doesn't have to be.
Because they don't have my brand of Cheerios otherwise.
Well, the reason why big box stores exist is because of stroads. It's because they create one centralized location for like an entire region to go to. Whereas if you dispersed it more, like grocery stores would be a lot smaller. I think hardware stores, it would be tough because it's like inevitable. I mean, you need space to like put all that stuff.
Yeah.
But like if you could still like reduce the amount of stroads and maybe just have like intersections, maybe arterial intersections could still have like hardware stores and stuff like that.
Yeah. And you don't need, and I will say like in Atlanta, we do have grocery stores in the middle of the city center that are like, they're big enough. They have everything. Whether it's like, usually they're Publix. There's one Whole Foods that's like that. But if you needed like all of the ingredients to a complicated recipe or something, you would find it all there. But you're not also going to like pick up a Lego for your kid there. It's just a grocery store.
Yeah.
Which like some of the huge ones are just like turning into Walmarts where they try and do everything.
So a final, totally unrelated, but I heard that dollar stores are actually like pretty bad for neighborhoods because a lot of like other like things like grocery stores or drugstores oftentimes rely on like the snacks and chips to like make their money.
Oh, interesting.
Because like groceries, groceries often have very, quite low margins. And so they make a lot of their margins on like buying snacks. And the same with like, a Walgreens or a Rite Aid where they'll have like a little back, section with like ice cream pints and stuff like that. And so concentrating all of those things in a single dollar store format, actually, I heard it can like disrupt the business model of those other stores.
Oh, that's interesting.
So the last thing is elevated and daylighted intersections or roundabouts. So elevating an intersection, I mean, that costs a fair amount. I mean, I don't know how much it costs, but I imagine it costs money, obviously.
You're also going to get a lot of angry people, like, especially in America.
Yeah.
Americans just love driving, and I don't know how you convince them otherwise. That not everyone drives and just slow down. But yeah, you would make a lot of people angry with elevated intersections.
Yeah, but is it not worth getting somewhere 3 minutes early if you, potentially run over a couple people to get there? Like, that 3 minutes is time you'll never get back.
I know, but like that idea is totally going to die in the city planning meeting.
Well, like it is kind of telling where when you actually think about it, it's like people are like, they're like, you know what? I'd rather like accidentally kill people than like drive a little slower. like that's the logic.
Well, I don't think people think in those terms because they never think that they're going to do it.
Yeah, there's a certain level of denial, I guess.
Yeah.
And then so
it's like, not me, I'm responsible.
That's transportation. When it comes to zoning, we've talked about this in a separate episode, but mixed use zoning, densification. I didn't really bring this up. So there's a section on pollution that I took out. I think it still makes sense to separate industrial zoning. I think
yeah.
Still, yeah.
I would definitely separate industrial zoning. Here's a question that I haven't asked yet in this, and I don't think I wrote it down. If you are in a city that is zoned very poorly and it's basically built to that bad zoning, but you love that city and you don't want to leave for whatever reason, families there, whatever. How do you fix bad zoning?
Well, I mean, you get involved with your local community and advocate for it, because usually it's the local municipality who controls that. But there's a lot of people who are super against like mixed use zoning. They're super against higher density zoning. So it's sort of like it's a local fight.
I feel like even if you got people on board to like let's say you do change the zoning for the better, but people are, well, how fast would the market fix like the density or whatever once you fix the zoning? I guess that's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, it depends on other factors too. Like I think interest rates have a huge impact on how much new development gets built, because real estate is a very capital intensive industry. So everyone takes out mortgages to build, or loan other forms of loans to like build projects. So it's very dependent on interest rates. Also the cost of labor. Oh, here's another thing. Just what technologies can be used to make building cheaper. So modularized building, where you make modules offsite and then basically you just kind of like assemble everything on site. That's cheaper. But then, do ordinances allow for that type of construction? Because basically housing is built as like bespoke products. Where, everybody shows up and they spend, basically build. It's like tailoring a bespoke suit. That's kind of how housing is done. But like, are there ways to make it more modularized, and do local laws allow for that type of construction? So there's other factors beyond just the zoning laws. I mean, the zoning laws are like a hard blocker. Like if you don't have the right zoning, you can't build certain things.
Yeah.
Once you remove it, it really depends on those other factors too. So, but a lot of cities, like places like Minneapolis, I mean, people built, once they relaxed their laws, people built a lot of housing, and their rents have been pretty stable. So, anyways, utilities, right sizing infrastructure based on density, greenery. So you want to have a lot of street, boulevards, trees, parks, plazas, town squares, etc.
So they're talking about capping our highway in the downtown area and just putting a park there.
In Atlanta?
I'm so excited for that.
I kind of feel like it was a mistake to put a highway right through downtown. That seems unwise.
Yeah. I don't like it in terms of I have to cross it every day. With walking across it, and I think it'd be worse if I was driving crossing it. But once they cap it, I think it's going to be really, really great. Because it's still great to have the highway go through so you can just get right off and into the city where you need to be.
So is the entire highway going to be a tunnel then?
Yeah. In that urban area.
That'd be pretty cool.
They say they're going to start construction on it next year after the World Cup. And they aren't going to close down the highway. That apparently that was a hard no.
Yeah. Encouraging retrofittable buildings, that's another thing that I kind of left on the cutting room floor, but it seems pretty obvious. Like if you design buildings such that they can easily be transferred into like other types of building, other types of uses, that's pretty sensible. So what kind of cities fit the mold of these principles? So I was going to come up with a big list, but I just didn't have the time. So I just came up with Barcelona.
My favorite is Clickhole has a really funny, let me find it because the headline is just perfect. The title is "There's Always a Catch. This walkable city with a robust public transport network is Boston." And the whole article is just it's trashing Boston, but praising its urban planning. I don't know how good Boston actually is. I flew through there the other day. Had a long layover, so we took the ferry into the city from the airport. It was very novel.
So that kind of covers everything. I think when that was a lot of talking, but when you really think about it, good urban design's pretty simple. It's just narrow grid streets with lots of trees. I mean, and that's like 90% of it.
That is about that's a lot of it. And encouraging densification.
Yeah, densification.
Fighting the NIMBYs.
Corner stores, bike lanes,
This is one question I haven't been able to ask yet, but I have it written down here. When do suburbs make sense?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by suburb. If you're talking like an area that's mostly for residential purposes, I feel like it, like it makes sense as a place to raise a family. I think the difference is there's suburbs and then there's suburbs. Like there's like, if you have a, family living in a duplex and, it's a sort of neighborhood 5 blocks away from downtown, it can still feel pretty suburban,
Mm-hmm.
But then you also have the suburbs that are like a giant McMansion that's like, 10 miles away from downtown. And that's also a suburb. So I think suburb itself is not really the relevant factor. It's more like, the other design principles I mentioned.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of like planning, like how do you plan like
the
suburban areas to be decent commuter towns where you're not trying to figure out this trade-off of, do I get this extra square footage, but now I have 30 minutes more on my commute?
So the further away you get from, the further away you get from downtown, the less dense things naturally get, even if there were no zoning laws, because the land value is lower. And so when you build multiple levels to a building, it costs more per square foot, but you also get higher rents. And so in a high rent area, it's worth it, but in a lower rent area, it's not worth it. And so even without zoning laws, naturally, the further you get away from the city center, the less dense it'll be. And so that'll kind of naturally happen. But then like the huge sprawl doesn't happen in places with less restrictive zoning. So typically like the actual suburban part doesn't physically get that far away from downtown. So it's actually not that hard in a lot of those places to like get to downtown, really. As long as you have a good bus network and good trains and stuff like that, it's pretty doable, I think. I guess the key is just having a robust transit network.
I think that's what breaks it, is when you don't.
Well, I think the current model, I think a lot of the American model, it's just like ultimately designed by law to be at such low density that it's not realistic to have buses going everywhere from like the suburbs to the downtown area.
Yeah.
So anyways, do you have any comments beyond what we've talked about?
Well, I think one, just looking at this, thinking about this topic, I thought a lot about the rural-urban divide, especially in politics. And there's so much debate between urbanization and living out in the country, because apparently I think it's that, and do you have a college degree, that is the highest predictor on who you vote for.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of opinions about it.
I mean,
I saw so many posts where it was just like conservative subreddits going, when will liberals admit that their progressive policies have ruined their cities, and like they don't even live in those cities.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people. Well, look, big cities do have crime-ridden parts of the cities. I mean, that's undeniable. But
That's almost always the case.
yeah, that's in every part of the world. But like most parts of most cities are fine. You know,
Yeah.
like I've lived in many places, and some of those places were like pretty decently sized cities. Some were medium sized cities. Like if you were a local, like you usually can figure out like, okay, like that neighborhood's sketchy, don't go there, but the rest of the city's like pretty much okay. Is like kind of the vibe I get.
Yeah.
So the idea that like everywhere's an urban hellscape where you're just gonna get like jumped and murdered is just like kind of ludicrous. And like the people who seem to be the most paranoid about like urban crime are like people who live like an hour away and live in a giant McMansion with like a backyard pool. And it's like, why are you afraid of like, why are you afraid of what's happening in New York City? You don't even live there.
They don't want, that was the other big comment I saw, is just like, y'all can be urban, just don't bring your urban policies where I live.
Like what policies?
I know, I don't think anyone's doing that. I don't know. It's a grievance mentality, so I'm not sure. It usually stops there.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think living in a rural versus urban area, it's really a matter of preference, and also a matter of what's your job. Because if you're a farmer, then obviously you can't do that in the city, so you do it in the country. A lot of people who consider themselves like rural people, or like kind of style themselves as such, like don't really live. You know, like they would like they live on the like edges of an urban area, and they like still commute to the city or like to work, or their job is somehow tied to that urban area.
Yeah,
so even though they might
described like 80% of Dallas.
Yeah, exactly. So like, you know, you live on the outskirts of Dallas, and you know, have work at a business that like interfaces with, you know, some company in downtown. Like you're not really a country person. Like, you know, like you're not.
Yeah.
You might have a big yard, but like you're not a farmer, you know.
You don't have animals. Well, maybe a dog. Some cats.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps up our series on urban design. We'll go with another topic next time.